Do we
What are
have
the
a lag again?
healthiest? Maybe a little. Hey guys, welcome to another episode of the Remind podcast. I'm Dr. Ashleigh Moreland and I'm joined by my co-host Dave Masterton. How are you, Dave? You good? Ready to
Very
go
good.
deeper into the topic of love. So
Love it.
today, guys, love it. Today we are following on from our episode last week. If you didn't catch it, definitely go and check it out. And we're going deeper into this topic of love. So this is a two-parter. If you haven't yet, go and click subscribe because you're going to want to see part 2 next week and you will want to know when it lands. Because what we're talking about in this episode is what are the dumbest things people have done for love. We're talking about dysfunctional love. We're talking about unhealthy love. And next week, we're going to do the flip side of the coin where what are the smartest things we do for love? What does healthy love look like? Now, this is going from where we might be now to where we want to be in the future. So go and hit subscribe because you're going to want to know about it. Dave, what are the
Yes.
dumbest things we've done for love? What does this look like? So we're talking about dysfunctional, unhealthy love.
I mean, rattling off just, I suppose, examples. There's probably too many, but I think, I can cheat because we've been talking off air. They all have a very common theme now, don't they? It's sort of like the dumbest things that I've sort of done have been things that I don't really want to do. So it's been
So it's like it's not authentic. It's not in integrity with your truth.
well, it's both, but that's a big one, right? So some things like there are some things I've actually grown through being pushed through my comfort zone when it comes to love. So there's been some good things, but really the ones that, you feel that real like in your stomach that you have to do something, but you don't want to do it, but then you do it and then you push through and you kind of feel really good about it. That feeling was okay, I'm pushing through discomfort and it feels like growth. Now every dumb thing I've got,
Yeah.
so forget about the example, is it hasn't felt right and I've done it and it feels worse. My gut feels worse and it continues to
Yes.
feel
Life
worse.
taking.
Exactly.
Awesome.
And then you got this thing where you're sort of like, well, how do I change this? But then you don't want to change this because then you sort of convince yourself that everything's kind of okay because you've got a pro and a con list and you're trying to balance it out. Yet the gut still feels like crap. And then you
Yeah.
sort of start to realize, oh, actually, what I then need to do, it feels gut wrenching. And then
Yeah.
being in that energy, for me, hands down, stupidest thing that I've ever done. Staying in it when
Isn't
you
that
feel that way.
interesting? Yeah. And I find this is so fascinating when I'm having conversations with a lot of clients. And something I hear a lot is people who feel like they've lost themselves. They don't know
Mm.
who they are anymore. They don't know, I don't know who I am. I don't know what I like. I don't know what I want. And
Mm.
that is a really ruptured and fractured sense of self. And the thing that I find really interesting is when you mentioned, there's some things that you don't want to do, but then you do it and there's growth and there's expansion and all those kinds of things. For me, that is differentiating between what are the sensations in my body that's determining why I don't want to do it. Do
Mm.
I not want to do it because the fear part of me, the Harry in me is like, oh, but what if this and what if that and what if this and what if that? If it's only Harry is my reason as to why I don't want to do it because I'm scared, well, that's not a good enough reason to not do it, but it's an orange flag. It means we sit with it. We explore it.
Mm.
We see, is this a trauma response? Is this something that's just trying to protect me and keep me safe? The other thing is when my authentic self, when the truth of who I am perceives that it's not in alignment for me, it's not right for me, it doesn't feel right for me, that is the intuitive self, the soul self, right?
Mm,
So I find that really interesting because this is the concept between life taking versus life giving love. And when people say, oh, I feel lost, like I lost myself in that relationship, or I lost myself in this job, or whatever it might look like for them, and I've experienced this,
mm,
I I find it's a really helpful conversation to come back to when that love was a part of your life. Did you become more or less who you are? And healthy love, you become more of who you really are. Unhealthy love, you become less. So there's compromise. There's so, and I mean, all relationships have compromise and sacrifice and all that sort of stuff, but
absolutely.
never, ever, ever at the expense of your authentic self. Like to me, if my husband, he likes the dishes done a certain way, well, I can change that habit without losing myself in the process.
Mm,
If my husband turned around and said to me, when you connect with your best friend, I don't like that. You need to change. You need to not be friends with that person who's
mm,
been my best friend and a great support network for me. That requires me to abandon myself to choose him and prioritize his needs.
mm.
So it becomes a really fine line between what is compromise and sacrifice that doesn't require us to abandon ourselves versus what is compromise and sacrifice where in order to choose the person and please the person we have to abandon ourselves, our own needs and our truth. That's huge, absolutely huge.
Well, it absolutely is, and I really like the fact you brought up this thing about um, people just sort of not being able to or want to change, or they find it. Actually, I'm butchering this, but whatever you said, it reminded me of when people say it's really complicated or I'm
Mm,
really confused. Whenever you've used those
yeah,
terms, it's sort of like, actually, is it complicated, or do you know what to do, but you don't necessarily want to do it? Or you just want to have a mountain more
mm,
evidence before you take that leap of faith? Because here's the thing, if where you
yeah,
were was meant for you, there would be nothing rubbing up against it. There'd be no friction, and it would just be fine. There wouldn't be any
yeah,
confusion. If you're supposed to be here and you're supposed to be doing this thing out of service or sacrifice or whatever it is,
mhm,
right? Then that's where you're supposed to be. And you wouldn't have that, your authentic self rubbing up against it, going, this may not be for you. So when you start to think about confusion, um, it's complicated or whatever it is, look at to the reasons why, because it's really quite difficult. Because I can't stress at the start, especially for me, the start of both of these things, something which is growth and something which is not for me, at the start, they feel very similar. There
interesting.
is there is a slight difference, but they do feel so similar because you've got your intuition guiding you to go that way, and the fear sucker punching you in the gut. Um, and when you break through that and you start to go through what it is that you need to go through, which is a big deal. Let's not diminish any of these life choices that we're sort of talking about.
Mm,
It's brutal, but when you get the other side, it's like great. As opposed to, you are meant to be, you're where you're supposed to be, but your intuition or you've got your fear sort of saying, pushing you off in a different direction, and you sit
yeah.
in it, and it's just, actually, I've butchered it again. I'm having one of those brain fade days.
All right.
But
It
I
sounds to me like you're processing out loud and you're making sense of it as it happens. That's okay.
pretty much, but it's more along the lines of your intuition. If it's not meant for you, and you start going down a certain path, your intuition will say nope, and then kind of bring you back. But then there's the other side of you are on the right path and your fear wants to sort of push you out, or if you start to go in a direction that's not for you and your intuition says, whoa, whoa, whoa,
Mm.
whoa, whoa, come back. Very similar feelings. But if you keep on, it's about sort of knowing what is the healing side, pushing through the comfort versus this is not for you. I think that's kind of what I'm trying to say, that they do feel very
Yeah.
similar, but there is that little something where that if you're constantly staying in that same line, that same path, and it gets harder and harder and harder and
Yeah.
harder and harder and harder, then there's a big clue that's not for you.
Yeah.
And
I
so
think
when you're
that's fair.
staying,
And again, it comes down to my friends Harry and Sally, where it it feels similar because it's the same bus.
mm,
The only thing that's different is who's driving it. And so for me,
mm,
my discernment really improved when I could clearly discern the different voices between my Harry, my inner Harry, my ego self, my fear driven stuff, my trauma responses, my survival instincts versus my Sally. And when I really lent into that and I really started a consistent practice of discerning whose voice is it, what does
mm,
that sound like and what does it feel like in my body when they speak, and how can I identify which part of myself is it, my pain body, my flesh body, my survival orientated self, or is it my eternal self with all the access to all the wisdom? That is such a breakthrough moment, and it's like a constant daily walk. It's a daily journey,
mm, mm,
to constantly be refining and refining and refining and refining that. It's like tuning. It's a tuning, ever so slightly tuning into what that elevated consciousness just means greater awareness, right?
mm.
Um, and yeah, that's really, really powerful, because I think that's important. It is the same
Yeah,
bus. It's the same bus.
just
It's just how good are you at determining who's behind the wheel?
and I really like the fact that you said that there's always two parts at play, because it doesn't matter how much healing you go through.
Always.
There's still the other
Mhm.
version. It doesn't shut up completely. It's just more quiet, and
No, it's not meant to.
when it's at play. But at the start, it's almost like it's role reversal. The one that's kind of in the driver's seat the whole time shouldn't be. And then you start to go, well, how do I know the
Totally.
difference? How do I start the discernment? And I think, well, it's not that I think, my experience has been that when you have this feeling that you have to be doing something, but there's a whole lot of it that
Mhm.
scares the absolute hell out of you.
Yeah.
And at some point, you've got to just go with it. Like
Mhm.
it's like exercising. And here I am, probably the heaviest I've been in a very long time talking about exercise. But when it comes to exercise, you've got to start to do it to then know what it's like. So the same thing comes with discernment. If there's something that you feel as though you need to do, and you're constantly convincing yourself that you don't need to do it, but the damn thing doesn't go away, try it
Yeah.
on small things first. Give it a go.
Yeah.
See how you feel, because you're not going to it's not you're not going to sit and wait and sit in the same energy and then miraculously something's going to change, unless you're just
Totally.
aching for a towel moment. Like
And I
um
think I think you make a really good point there about starting with the small things first,
mm,
because remember, our Harry is nervous system. Nervous
mm,
system, anything too drastic, anything too fast. If a predator moved really quickly, the nervous system has to activate because it's perceived as a threat, right? So
mm,
if I had to jump a thing that was too big for my current capacity, my nervous system is going to be activated, right? Because it's not
yep,
safe. So applying this exact same theory, I was having a really enlightening conversation last night around how the big inspiring stories of the rags to riches and the this starting out really low, the depths of despair to this raging success, how sometimes that can actually be detrimental and lose people. Actually, I would argue a lot of the time it can be detrimental and lose people,
Mm,
because someone who's so far down here looks at that, and because it's so big and so extreme and so far out of their reach, they go, I can't do that. I can't have that. That's for them and not for me. And so I remember a few rounds of Rise and Thrive ago, this came up, and uh, I said to the group, hey, you're learning to choose you. You're learning to learn what it is that you like, what your
mm,
preferences are. You're learning to have relationship with yourself again. And if I said, you've got to choose you in all the aspects of your life, guess what? No one would do that. It's too much. The
mm,
nervous system would go absolutely gung ho and say, absolutely not. That's too much. It feels unsafe. I'm just going to stay right here where I am. So, what I got them to do is I said, next time you go grocery shopping, I just want you to choose one thing that if no one else had a say, if no one else was going to influence you, I just want you to choose one thing that you are only buying because it brings you joy, because you love it,
mm,
because it lights you up, because it makes you choose you. I was literally purchased one thing. That's it.
mm,
And it was so crazy, the stories that came from that, of people going, oh my gosh, it felt so foreign. I actually realized I felt guilty because I bought this instead of that, because it's something that is for me,
mm,
because everyone else likes that. So I stopped buying it because no one else liked it. But because no one else liked it, I actually deprived myself. And that's just the tiny little examples of unhealthy things that we do in our lives, where we deprive ourselves, where we sacrifice, we self-sacrifice in order to please or to give.
mm.
And we do that in the name of love. Oh, I won't do that because of I love my kids, or yeah, it's crazy.
But I mean, I think that's the kind of the beautiful thing about that, or this side of the conversation. A lot of people are doing this for all the right reasons. They're doing it because they want to be giving. They're being quite considerate. All of those things. Also, you've also got the fact that their trauma is informing them that this is what they need to do to be kind and considerate,
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah.
that's kind of, we're not sort of saying stop being kind and considerate. What we're trying to do is say, lay down the trauma informed decisions that are saying that you need to do this to be a nice person. You need to do this to
Yeah.
be a loving person.
Yeah. Wow, that's huge. The thing that comes up for me is some of the dumb things I've done in the name of love is fixed people's problems, taken
Mm,
their pain away, helped to soothe them. And you know why that's a really dumb thing to do? It's a dumb way to love someone, because if I constantly fixed their problems, I actually disempowered them from ever learning how to fix it themselves.
no growth, yeah.
I've done that. And so that's an unhealthy way to love someone.
Mm,
I think that's absolute gold.
and it creates a
Another unhealthy
codependency.
way, like it it is codependent. We've got a lag again. It is
Yeah, we do.
codependence. And I look at that and I go, I think back to my own life, because I was on the unhealthy side of love. And I was like, what are the silly things I've done in the name of love? I tolerated abuse and disrespect. Oh, but I love him.
Mm,
I tolerated an absolute annihilation of my self esteem. Oh, but I love him. I exposed my children to trauma, to
mm,
violence. Oh, but I love him. So I compromised my, if you've got two sides, one is intergenerational trauma, one is intergenerational healing. If you want to go down, to cross over into the path of intergenerational healing, you cannot be choosing the person over the promise of your healing. So, what that means is I don't get to say, oh, but I love them, if loving them traumatizes my children. I don't get to say, oh, but I love them, if loving them and choosing them means it's at the expense of my well being, of my health, of my okayness. Because then I'm the one choosing it. I become my own abuser in that case. And I had this revelation in my own like my own healing journey. And I want to pre-frame this by saying that all is good. I have a wonderful relationship with my mum and dad. The interesting revelation for me, though, was that I always saw that my dad was my abuser in my stories of childhood trauma. But what I realized is that my mum stayed with him for love for years. Oh, but I love him. It would have been so hard for her to leave.
Mm.
And she did. But her choice of love or her choice of circumstance, it was her choice that traumatized us. Because if she had have made a different choice, we wouldn't have been at the hands of his trauma, at the hands of his abuse.
Mm.
And that was really confronting for me. And that's not blaming my mum. It's not
Sure,
anything.
sure.
It's just a revelation around how I choose to pursue relationships in my own life. And that was a big turning point for me in my first marriage, going, if I continue to choose him because I love him, what am I doing to my kids? I'm their abuser by keeping them here. I'm their abuser by teaching them and showing them that this is a healthy, like that this is what a marriage is, that this is what relationship is. It's completely dysfunctional, unhealthy, but
Mm.
I'm choosing to teach them that. That's my choice. And that's how intergenerational trauma works. It's what are you choosing in the name of love that is not love, but harmful?
Oh, I mean, that's so powerful. It's like you, and I suppose you're talking about kids and all of that, which is a very specific, I suppose, niche of what we're talking about, not the whole thing. But if you're not sure about, are you doing the right thing for your kids, or if you're doing it for yourself, or whichever way you think of it, I think you raise a really good point. What is it that you're showing your kids? And what is it that you are sort of saying and modeling to them? This is the relationship I want for you. Or are you sitting
Yep.
in a relationship going, I want you to be better than this. I don't want you to have this.
Yep.
I want you to have something different. It's all like, okay, well, if
Yep.
that's the case, how about you
Yep.
do something about it? How about you show them?
100%.
Yeah. And
100%.
look,
I deal with this every single day with people
but
saying, "What do you want?"
yeah, exactly. But it's very difficult because, and I even think, it's very easy to sit there in hindsight, right? Because for you and me, we've had marriages that we've ended or that have ended, and we had kids in them. And so we've taken a specific path. It was been fairly brutal. But there was a time when there was a version of both of us that was still back there sitting in it. There was a version
I
of us that
chose it
was,
for 8 years.
it, so
I chose
yep.
it.
Now, and during that time, did you realize you were choosing it? Or did you think you were doing what
No,
was best?
during that time, yeah, during that time while I was in it,
Mm,
I felt like this isn't fair. I know I deserve so much more than this. I knew that there was dysfunction. I knew that
mm,
it wasn't healthy. Like it was really turbulent. When it was good, it was really good. When it was bad, it was really bad. But it was up and down like a yo yo and it was so
gotcha.
turbulent. But I loved him. And so I would have a bias towards the good times and the good
Mm,
moments and push the other stuff to the side because the other stuff that revealed the truth of the damage that that relationship was doing to me, to my friendships. I lost so much of who I was in that relationship. And while I was in the relationship, I blamed him.
mm,
I blamed him because he wasn't different, because he wasn't more gentle or more kind or more patient or more whatever. But totally abdicated the responsibility that I had that said, well, all that's true, but
mm,
you're the one who's still tolerating it. You're the one who's still here, who's choosing this every day. You don't get to blame him for your choices.
mm.
It's crazy. So
100%.
my big thing was like this eye-opening moment where it kind of happened over a period of time, right? I had this conversation with my dad, and I said to my dad, if my marriage was like yours, if my husband treated me the way you treated my mum, would you want me to stay with him? And he went, No, I
Mm.
wouldn't. Which was eye-opening for him, but also it was eye-opening for me that what I was modeling marriage on was not something that I actually wanted. And I didn't know what healthy relationship and healthy love even looked like. I have
Mm.
clients who think that their mum and dad had a great relationship because they never fought. And then I'll go, "Oh, so they're still together," and they're like, "No, they divorced when I was 6." And you can see this absolute shattering as that comes out of their mouth when they realize, "Oh, I always thought that they were happy because they never fought in front of us, but people who are happy don't divorce."
Mm-hmm.
So, maybe they just never knew how to do healthy conflict and never fought in front of us, but there was tension you could cut with a knife. Maybe they were blah, blah, blah. So I'm not
Mm.
saying go ahead and have full-blown Barneys in front of your kids,
No.
but I'm saying that it's not as toxic as people think to have disagreement, to have moments where you're dysregulated, moments where you're struggling to communicate in healthy ways, but you also demonstrate the repair of that, where you also show up and say, that's not how I want to show up in our relationship. Can I have a do-over? And we covered that a few episodes ago.
Mm.
So some of the crazy stuff, like giving up careers, changing jobs, massively changing your appearance. I
Yeah,
like,
well, I would say for me, it wasn't both my marriages. There was never this, incredible abuse or
yeah,
anything like that. There was just sort of this slow and steady, especially in the first marriage, just a slow and steady sort of me disengaging. So I'm only going to talk about it from my point of view. Um, Now, whether that was justified or not, there was me disengaging, and it was a long sort of slow disengagement. But I never really contemplated who or what I would be outside of this marriage. 2 kids, very long relationship, and like we'd just done most things together. So when it got to the point where it's sort of like, oh God, I'm starting to have a few thoughts about would I be happier elsewhere, and then you kind of shush them away, and then they get bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger as the disengagement's going. And then it got to a point where it's like, okay, I remember another colleague that I was working with. They were with their partner, and they said, I'm just waiting for one good fight, and I'm going to leave my partner because I'm there. It's like, it's it's
they
convenient to
needed to
be
feel
with them. And
justified
as soon as
almost.
they said that, I
Yeah.
went, bang, something crazy happened within me. It was like, oh shit, am I in this relationship because it's just convenient now? And then it was just like a whole
Mm,
big mind sort of melt. And then I realized at the time, I I'm basically out because
yeah.
I don't like feeling this way. I don't like who I've become because during this sort of disengagement, I was becoming more insular and more insular.
Yeah.
And you could
That
even
tends to
ask my
be what
first
happens.
wife. I wasn't a whole lot of fun to be around. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Why don't we do
That
this?
tends to
Why
be
don't we
what
do
happens.
that?
Our whole world starts to get smaller and smaller and smaller. And
Mm,
that's not always a bad thing, because I have to be honest that throughout my healing journey, my world has ended up fairly small because I have a standard of connection, and not everyone
mm,
is at that level of connection, and that's okay. I have a really big, expansive world for love and for service and for all that sort of stuff. But I'm talking about my inner close circle, my inner world is really small now. But that doesn't feel suffocating and trapped and
mm,
isolating and life taking. And my sense of self, am not suppressed. So when we stop enjoying people and things and places and stuff that previously brought us joy, that's a red flag. So when I look at dysfunctional and unhealthy relationships, there's a whole heap of things. Like if all of a sudden someone, I mentioned massively changing how they look, that can be, it's an orange flag. Starting to isolate themselves and ignoring friends and family, that's an orange flag. It needs to be explored. Pretending to be someone you're not, so faking interests, going to restaurants that don't interest you, changing your personality massively, changing your lifestyle to, match with your partner's expectations or lifestyle. Quitting jobs is an orange flag. Another really big one that I see a lot is people who all of a sudden start skipping things like, birthday parties or social things that previously they would have been really engaged in, but now they're in a relationship or for love, choosing the person, they stop choosing those important events like family gatherings or connecting with their colleagues or whatever that might be. So there's so many ways this can manifest. Like my husband got tattooed this week. He got a new tattoo. And to me, that's not a condition of my love for him. Like, it's neither here nor there. It's not going to take from me and take from our relationship if he gets a tattoo. But for him, that's an expression and it's an expansion. It's a creative expression for him. And he gets to connect to more of who he is through art. And that's his chosen form of art. So if I turn around and he had this burning desire and was like, I'm going to express the fullness of who I am through this artistic expression and representation of something, and I'm going to do this on my body, and like, if I turn around and said, absolutely not, I don't like tattoos, you're under, I'll turn in my grave if you get a tattoo. I'll disown you if. That is how you lose the authenticity of who you are in relationships. When people put constraints on you, when people put limitations, when people put conditions, when people try to control what's expression of the essence of who you are in life, it's freaking scary and full
And
on.
look, one easy way to figure out, are you in that position? Because it could have been just a slow descent into that, where there's no sort of major sort of points you can point to go, I do this because of them. When you are interacting with that person, do you like the version of yourself that's interacting with them?
Oh, I
Because
love that.
if you have this
Yeah, I
situation
love
where you
that.
feel like you're dimming yourself, or you feel like I can't do that because of that, or I'm trying not to trigger them, or I'm trying to make sure they don't do that because that will trigger the hell out of me, and I'm one good, blow
Yeah.
up away from doing something I don't want to do, or whatever it
Yeah.
is, right? Or let's look at the healthy side, and this will be for next week. Imagine being the ultimate version of yourself, completely
Mm,
unshameably authentic, and the person in
yeah.
front of you can simply not get enough. And if you're not there,
Oh,
where are you?
Oh, I cannot wait until next week. There was a version of me probably 5 years ago that if I had to have a conversation that we're going to have next week around the health, it's taking everything within me to exercise some discipline to not go down that path because it feels like it slots into the conversation.
Mm,
But if we're going to have that conversation next week around what does healthy love look like? What are the
mm.
smartest and best things that you've done in the name of love?
Or you can
Oh
do.
my goodness. Yeah, or you can do in the name of love. What does that look like? What does
Mm,
that feel like? I can't wait to talk about that because we've had to go on this journey. And another thing actually that just came to me is that a lot of people think that if they've identified that there's this abandonment of self in their relationship, they think that we're saying end the relationship. Don't hear what I'm not
no.
saying. I am not sitting here advocating for ending relationships. I'm not sitting here advocating for breaking up marriages or divorce. I'm
Mm.
advocating for authenticity and healthy love in relationships. So, this conversation, the goal for me is to be able to help people to understand and identify where they might be engaging in
Mm,
love at the expense of their sense of self, so that it can open up a conversation going, I want to be more of who I truly am. And is this person willing to grow with me? Because you're ultimately going from this camp
100%.
here, which is how we've done relationship, to this camp here, which is how we want to do relationship. This feels toxic. I'm losing myself. I can't express myself. I can't, whatever it is, right? I want to go over to here. That's going to require a bridge. In order for our relationship, where there's two of us in that relationship, we both need to be willing to cross the bridge.
Mm,
So the only options are I'm going to cross the bridge and see, like, give you the time and space to work out what you're doing, and you might cross
100%.
the bridge too.
100%.
We can team up and we can cross the bridge together, but the relationship that we have then is a completely new relationship. It's the death, burial, and resurrection, I
Mm,
call it. That's what my relationship has been. Then you've got the people who commit to crossing the bridge. Now, that's the healthy love that we're going to talk about next week.
mm,
But their partner digs their heels in and refuses to cross the bridge with them, which means the only option is they either give up the promised land, give up that really healthy, enriching love where they get to connect to the truth of who they are, fully express themselves in their relationship, show themselves entirely, warts and all,
mhm.
or they sacrifice the promised land to choose the person who's not willing to grow with them, who's not willing to work, who's not willing to expand with them. And
And look,
that is when we are abusing ourselves.
and the only one thing I'd add to that is if you actively choose that and you're okay with it, and I'll just repeat that, if you actively choose that and you're simply okay with it, it's not a problem. But
Yeah,
it shouldn't be grinding
100%.
up against you. If you feel the grinding, then
Yeah.
it's an issue because there are some things, some soul contracts that kind of need to play out that way, and that's okay.
Mhm.
But it's when you
Yeah.
actively choose it and you're grinding up against something, there's that thing that's within inside you that's saying, "No." But
Yeah.
100%,
Can
yes,
I add something to that though?
sure.
Because I think that's a really important point when you say there are some soul contracts that have to play out like that. That's true. But the just like a contract can end. And so yes, it can play out like that, which means it has to happen the way it's happening. My
Mhm,
first marriage had to happen. That had to
mhm.
happen for both of us to have the experiences that we needed to have. We agreed to do that, right? At an unconscious level. But once it's played out, the
Oh,
contract's
yeah.
done. It's been fulfilled. The terms and conditions of the contract have been
Done.
fulfilled. It's played
Yep.
out. You don't have to continue choosing it. Just because there's that element to it does not mean to say that you have to keep choosing it. The
Mhm.
point is, it's had to play out so that you are faced with a crossroads where you get to choose my evolution and growth or my pain and misery.
Free
And we're
will.
all here for misery. That's free will. And
That's
we're all
absolutely
here for our evolution
free
and
will.
growth, every single
Absolutely.
person.
And so,
Yeah.
look, yes, I'm going to mimic exactly the same. I'm not advocating any one solution, right? We're just pointing out, separation is something that is sometimes required. You and I are examples of that, but it's not always
Mhm.
that's what's required.
Yeah.
And, it's not going to be about you or
Which
me
I'm
telling
also an
people,
example of.
yeah, well, we don't need to be telling people what they need to do because you know what? Their biggest bullshit
Yeah.
detector is actually in their stomach, their intuition, their gut feeling,
Yeah.
whatever it is. That's the one you're going to be listening to. And that's the one that will tell you, okay, yeah, if you need to wait because you need to find out more, you do that. If you know for sure, then
Yeah.
you go do that. So there's no
Mhm.
one sort of answer from multiples of people. It's all within themselves. But it's just so powerful to, and I think just to kind of bring it back to the top of the show and the whole sort of title,
Yeah.
what's the dumbest thing you've
Yeah.
done for love? Well, you've not loved yourself. You've just simply given it
Yeah.
away.
You've chosen a different love, right?
Yeah.
You've chosen someone else.
So,
Yeah.
wow, I am looking forward to next week's episode because I think this episode's probably more about the recognition. Because anyone who's come across this, there's already a niggling feeling that something ain't right.
Yep.
There's probably a niggling feeling that,
Yeah.
oh, okay, maybe I could be happier. And what do I do? One option is to do
Mhm.
this, another option is to do that. But my God, am I activated and really, you know, hopefully Ash and Dave have something that they can tell me that'll make it feel a whole lot better. Well, hopefully there's been a little
Yeah.
bit. Hopefully we've been encouraging.
Yeah.
But I think it's more
Might
about,
even develop a resource around this. What's coming to me is a resource like a quiz or a checklist or something, which can give people an idea of how can I identify this unhealthy love in my life.
hmm,
What are some signs that I might not have seen before now that can point to where I am abandoning my sense of self to choose someone else, which is a fear response. It's a fear of being alone. It's a fear of being rejected. It's a fear of being abandoned. But
hmm,
in doing so, we've abandoned ourselves. And so we're actually perpetuating the abandonment wound simply by abandoning our sense of self. So
hmm,
I don't know. I'll sit with that and I'll see what that looks like. Because I don't know if you guys know, but we actually put a blog. Every single podcast episode has a corresponding blog with practical tools and practical resources. But guess what? The blog's crashed at the moment. So we're building a new one. But
just for
once
now.
that's all done, our corresponding blog. So the blog post for this episode will be up. And we'll pop resources, and I always try and make it practically relevant, giving some actual practical advice or some thought processes around it, some scripting, whatever it might be that's relevant to each episode. But I'm feeling a quiz. I'm feeling some kind of thing that can help people self-assess and self-identify where there is unhealthy or dumb love or dumb actions or behaviors in their life where they're loving something else over a priority
Hmm.
of themselves because that's what they thought love was. Then next week, we'll look at some of the tools and resources and what are some signs that you have healthy love. What does that look like in your life?
Love it, love it, love it, love it.
I love it too. I love you guys. I love you for being here.
Yeah.
Let us know in the comments, what are the dumbest things you've ever done for love? Where have
Yeah.
you lost yourself in love? Where have you lost yourself? Where have you given up parts of who you really are for the sake of a relationship? Where have you abandoned yourself or sacrificed yourself thinking that you were doing the right thing, but was actually
Hmm.
life-taking for you? We would love to hear from you. Share this on socials, tag us, let us know what you're
Absolutely.
thinking. Let us know where you want us to take these conversations because we would love your input. This is for you, not for us.
Absolutely. Cost nothing to hit subscribe, cost nothing to hit the like button. Have a go, share it around. And until next week, guys, bye bye.